Gwilym, how are you, mate?
I'm really good. I'm looking forward to the weekend.
Yes, a long weekend, bank holiday weekend.
Yeah, and I've messed up everything about this podcast by realising we couldn't do it in the real world because of my weekend. So apologies to everybody for that.
Yeah, you've got some rugby gig on, haven't you? Is that a
rugby thing? my amazing. I talk about Beth, the baby, quite a lot. My amazing 18-year-old daughter Polly is really quite good at rugby, and she's doing a big women's rugby festival. Basic rugby tour this weekend. I've been going on rugby tour with various of my children probably every year for 20 years now. This is my last one unless Beth starts playing. In which case
she's a little ways off. She's only just over one, isn't she?
A little way off, but I could be back on tour in my mid-60s if I play my cards right. And
that's your fault for being an elderly parent.
But it's actually, I'll plug the tour actually. It's really lovely. It's in Worthing Rugby Football Club. And it's one of the most inclusive things I've ever been to. Absolutely fantastic. And it's probably would have been unthinkable even 10 years ago. It's brilliant. Yeah. And I'm struggling a bit because I've completely failed to do the fun bit, which you've got to do your fancy dress. And I'm supposed to go as a British icon. And I've totally...
You are a British icon.
About that. Who you are?
A British icon.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, you can't. Come on, if Carlsberg did IP, that sort of thing.
Lee Davis and Gwilym Roberts are the Two IPs in a Pod, and you are listening to a podcast on intellectual property, brought to you by the Chartered Institute of Patent Attorneys.
Speaking of which, and not to delay our guests, but IP's been in the news a fair bit this week. Not that anyone knows when this week is, because this podcast will go out in 2 or 3 weeks' time. And but just to reference it, this week has been the week of World IP Day.
Yes,
and we managed to get a piece in the national press about one of our members' daughters who invented a snow clearing robot at the age of 8, and the UK IPO granted her a patent. So that's amazing. So that's appeared in all of the national press. So it's been good to get that in. But the one thing, you're an IP expert. I know you don't really do trademarks, but what do you think about the Wagatha Christie trademark thing?
What is the Wagatha Christie trademark thing?
Oh, do you not know? Okay, so this is the Rooney Vardy case, which of course Vardy lost in the courts, but she's gone on to trademark the Wagatha Christie brand, which struck me as interesting from an IP perspective for 2 reasons. First of all, she didn't create it. You can quite easily trace it back to the originator in a tweet, kind of trying to describe the court case. And also, why didn't the Agatha Christie estate oppose it? It covers all of their classifications. It's one letter different. It made no sense to me. I did actually have the opportunity to raise it with the chief executive of the UK IPO, who just rolled his eyes at me.
It is a funny one, isn't it? Because ownership's a bit different from trademark. Like you've got the copyright angle. Taking us back to our excellent one on jokes, where it got, how small does the text need to be before you got the copyright side as well? There's a nice old crossover between copyright and trademarks. Let's get them in. Let's get them all in. Let's get the whole proof from the Wagatha Christie trial in.
Do you reckon we could get them on?
Easy.
Do you reckon we could get Vardy and Rooney in the same room together? Well, they wouldn't be in the same room. They'd be on Zoom, wouldn't they? So let's get our real guests on, though, shall we?
Yeah. Yes.
Hi, guys. How are you?
Hello. Yes, we're good.
Hello. Do you want to introduce yourself and take as long as you want over this and give us as much detail as you like, because we really want to know who you are and what you do?
Yep, my name is Noel McWilliam. I'm director of a startup company, Mitravitae, and we have a very interesting idea on renewable energy, or a new take on renewable energy generation that we hope will green the deserts of the world and capture globally significant amount of carbon. My background, I'm a mathematician by trade. I studied my doctorate at Warwick University. Prior to that, I was actually at UEA, from where we're speaking today. I studied environmental science as an undergrad. So I have an interest in dynamical modeling of industrial systems, but also modeling of ecological systems as well. So around about 2008, I formulated an idea for a new way of producing renewable energy. And I've been working with Michael since 2015, I think.
Yeah, something like that, 8-9 years.
Yeah, so we were introduced at Exeter University from one of my colleagues, actually, who's now a professor at the Environmental and Sustainability Institute at Exeter, Professor Stuart Townley. And yeah, Michael and I were introduced there. We engaged in prototyping one of the systems we have now installed in Australia. So Michael.
Can I step in there?
Yep.
Yeah, so I met Noel about 8-9 years ago. I was just completing my master's in renewable energy engineering down in Exeter University, but the Penryn campus, that was in Cornwall. It was the final group design project, and there was a group of us, and the project involved partnering with industry. So this is how I was introduced to Noel here, Mitravitae, and we went on from there. We liked working together. I really enjoyed the opportunity. It was some of the most challenging and rewarding work I've been involved with, and fortunately for me, we was able to keep it going. After I completed the masters, I was involved with Noel with the prototype, commissioning a prototype and getting that set up in Australia. And from the field trial in Australia, I suppose that motivated the PhD, which I then went on to do at the University of East Anglia, which I've just submitted 2 weeks ago, my thesis. So I'm in that probationary period between submitting your thesis, which you're massively relieved about, but then also being really worried about the Viva that's coming up next. So yeah, that's about me. That's where we're up to now. Obviously talking to you guys, being nominated for the Earthshot Prize, which is really exciting. Just even being nominated, I think, is amazing. Finally getting some recognition. I feel like me and Noel have been working on this great idea on integrated renewable energy systems for many years now. Noel's obviously was working on it before I joined, and so just getting a bit of recognition and with you guys as well is great news, I think.
You really know you've made it when you're on the podcast.
This is my first time being interviewed on a podcast. So
we'll be very gentle with you.
Okay.
Don't worry. So before we get too much into the kind of like the tech and what you guys are actually doing, do you want to tell us a wee bit about where you are in the patenting process? Because I'm not the IP expert. I just run the Chartered Institute of Patent Attorneys. Gwilym is the IP expert. But what we don't want you to do is we don't want you to go saying more than you should if you're not ready to kind of disclose stuff and the like. So kind of that makes it sound like I know what I'm talking about, Gwilym, doesn't it?
Okay, well, like you, I'm not the IP expert, so I'm going to leave this part over to Noel.
Well, I wouldn't quite say I'm an IP expert, but I've definitely been involved intimately with the process. So I've been working with David Warrilow from London IP Limited since, I think, around 2010. And we actually have now patents awarded in territories across the globe. So Australia, Israel, Russia, USA, India, we've just been granted, and across Europe as well. So quite a few territories. The IP itself that has been awarded is generic, so it's technology agnostic, meaning that it's more to do with the process and the types of technologies rather than the specific technologies. So it might be a good idea to explain what the idea is and how it is significant.
Please.
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah, okay. So essentially, it's a very simple idea. We're combining three existing technologies. So solar power, desalination / purification technologies, and biofuel technologies. And it came as quite some surprise to me that those three hadn't been combined previously. The advantage of doing so is essentially this. Solar power has and as with most renewables, it has a principal flaw in that the supply is variable. So if it's not sunny on a particular day, or if it's during the winter time, your solar generation isn't going to be performing as it would do on a nice sunny day. Or obviously, solar power doesn't produce overnight. So the standard approach to that is to just store some of that solar power and reclaim it later on. But the issue there is that the storage technologies are pretty poor. They perform badly. So batteries, for example, are inefficient. The most efficient lithium-ion batteries, I believe, are between 60 and 70% efficient. So you're losing a fair chunk of energy that you put into that. So what we're doing is we're not actually storing any excess energy in batteries or thermal storage. We're investing it, and we're investing it in water production. So we co-locate solar installation with a desalination installation, and we produce fresh water from salty water or contaminated water. So that might be human effluent. With that fresh water, we then grow a crop, and with that crop, we produce food and biofuels. And the biofuels are then used to generate electricity and heat overnight or in the wintertime. So the biofuels compensate for the deficiencies of solar generation. Now, solar and biofuels, i.e. hybrid generation, is a thing, and it's been around for some time. And solar and desalination has been investigated and researched for some time. But what hasn't been looked into is that tripart system, combining the three together. And the really interesting thing about it is not just that they complement each other in terms of when they generate electricity, but it creates something which is called feedback, basically positive feedback. And I guess the best way to describe it is to illustrate it with an example. So say, for example, we were to go to a semi-arid, arid location, as we have done in Australia, and we install a solar power generation system, and a desalination system. So in the first year, we're producing energy from our solar generator, and we use some of that energy to produce some water. And that water that we're producing, we're using to grow a crop in a location that would not otherwise support high yields or any kind of yields from a crop. So at the end of the first year, we have a crop and we derive biofuels from that crop. Now, in the second year, we have, again, solar generation, but now we have power coming from the biogeneration unit. So we have an additional amount of energy, which means that we have more excess energy during those times where our power production exceeds local demand. So that excess, rather than putting in a battery, we invest it in water production, and that means we have a higher, on average, level of water production than we did the year before, because we've got solar and the biofuels, which means because we've got more water, we can irrigate more land and we can grow more biofuel crop. So at the end of year 2, we had more biofuel than we did at the end of year 1, which means in year 3, we can produce more energy, have more excess, produce more fresh water, and therefore grow more crop in year 3 than we did in year 2. And that idea of a circular production system, basically, it would increase. The real interesting question is whether that increase decreases, i.e. the system decelerates and everything you're putting into the system is actually being eaten up through losses, in which point then everything you put in gets consumed and you don't really see any.
We're sort of terminal velocity, if you like.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The law of diminishing returns prevailing, basically. Or is it even possible, and this was the crucial question, the theoretical question that I was investigating before doing any of this, is it possible that if you invest 1 unit of energy in water production, can you get more than 1 unit of energy out when you come full circle? Now, this is not creating energy. It's not possible to do that. What you're doing essentially is releasing an environmental constraint, i.e. water limitation, to crop growth. And that crop is then, as it grows, it's self-absorbing an additional amount of sunlight, which you then bring into the system. Now, if your system design is efficient enough, you can design a system for which the losses are less than the amount of energy coming in that you can extract from the crop. Now, under those conditions, it means basically that your system can potentially grow exponentially. A geometric progression. You take any number and multiply it by itself multiple times. If that number is greater than 1 to begin with, then the overall product grows exponentially. If that number is less than 1, then the overall product of those numbers decays exponentially. So that was the real interesting theoretical question which we answered, and that's led us to, in terms of the IP, that positive feedback mechanism is unique, and that's helped us in arguing for a system that is not obvious. although we had no problem in arguing that it was novel, neither is or it isn't. Obviousness is a criteria that is difficult and subjective to evaluate. So showing substantive gain over prior art is actually crucial in that regard, and we were able to do so through this positive feedback mechanism. It also has, beyond IP, it has absolute amazing ramifications for the ability to grow crop in arid and semi-arid regions. It means that any system that we build will always ramp up to 100% in theory capacity. We can create any kind of system of any size, and it will naturally grow to maximum capacity. And in theory, we could green an entire desert that way.
Okay, that is all amazing, and I love this sort of thing. This is why I became a patent attorney, finding out how things work. But that was a super clear intro, so thank you very much. Actually, an initial question actually is, what's the level of automation on this? I mean, you've got components there, but it sounds like there's a decent amount of human activity involved. Hang it all together. How does it work?
Yeah, I mean, we're still in the beginning stages of getting systems up and running. So in Australia, we harvest the wheat straw and we pre-process it and then put it into a hopper, at which point then it becomes automated. So the hopper just feeds through into the biofuel system and then, it generates naturally. One of the technical issues we had, which spurred on Michael's research here at UEA, was that as with all biofuel technologies in their current state, they're not as mature as solar or desalination technologies. So there hasn't been really the funding to iron out some of the issues that they commonly have. And one of them is biofouling. So natural substances grown either energy crops or food crop residues have various different contaminants in them. And when you process them and create fuel from them, those contaminants feed into that fuel and they cause problems in the physical mechanisms of the power generation. So one of the technical issues we encountered in the field in Australia was basically that we had to clean the thing every 8 hours. And I don't know about you, but if you bought a car that you had to then take apart and scrub every 8 hours, you'd be buying a different car very soon. So those are real issues that we face, and these are issues that, in part, Michael's work has addressed.
Okay, and as you solve those problems, that's exactly the sort of thing that you then patent, right? So that you have that exclusivity. That's interesting. You're kind of, as you say, you're not creating energy. This is probably the first thing that patent offices panic when they think somebody thinks they've broken some of the fundamental laws. But as you say, obviously you've got the sun's energy coming in, fueling all of this, and you've got resources that you're releasing, as you say, by turning arid land into fertile land, etc., etc. You got some. I'm just enjoying this now. It's really interesting. You got some interesting limitations. You've got the solar cell. Presumably, a limit is literally the area of solar cells that you've got, and presumably there comes a point where, in order to continue the growth, you actually have to basically stick some more solar cells on. Is that right? Or
Yeah. So one of the aspects of the system is that these technologies are complementary, and I see solar as a third leg on a stool. It supports the feedback process that happens between the crop and the irrigation. There's a minimum amount of solar that one would need for any given efficiency of the other parts of the system. So yeah, as the system grows, if you want to increase the overall capacity of your production, then you would need to proportionately increase the solar component.
And actually, it's interesting about the water supply point. So you want to do it in deserts. And I know you don't need clean water, you need dirty water. Where do you get the water from in the desert?
Well, yeah, so Australia is one of our initial target markets for a very good reason. And that is basically, I don't know if you've heard of it, but dry land salinity. So it's a pervasive environmental problem in Australia. It's probably the second most pressing environmental issue there. And it comes about principally because early settlers, Western settlers, effectively cleared the scrubland that is now occupied by the wheat belt that stretches all the way from the east to west of Australia down the southern sort of basket region. By clearing that scrub is tends to be quite tall, depending on the maturity, but it can reach 10 or 20 meters high. And the root systems are similarly deep. Now, when it rains in Australia, it really rains. The root systems are able to cope with that by essentially the deep root systems are able to absorb a significant proportion of that rainfall. And as they absorb it, they breathe it out into the atmosphere. So they bring it back up and into the atmosphere. Removing that scrub vegetation and replacing it with a very short stature crop such as wheat, well, the root system is also not very deep. It's about 1 meter deep. So it's unable to absorb the rainfall events, or the water from the rainfall events. And what happens is then that water then percolates into the groundwater aquifers. And interestingly, Australia has over millennia, the geology of it effectively, Australia is a big basin. As rainfall occurs in Australia, obviously when on the coastal regions, salt particles that crystallize out of ocean spray get entrained in the precipitation and have been gradually deposited in that ancient strata in Australia. So there's a natural salt deposit within the geology across Australia. And that salt is being dissolved by this additional source of water it's coming in, and it's being brought to the surface. And where it hits the root zone in the soils, it's destroying crops. And you can see it. I mean, if you just go onto Google Maps and have a look, especially around Western Australia, you'll just see these white patches, and they're all around essentially. And to give a sense of the magnitude of the issue, ANRA, which is 2008 statistic, I don't think they're a government body anymore, estimated that that 54% of all farms in Western Australia were affected by dry land salinity, and that proportion would increase by 2050. So it's an absolutely massive issue for Australian farmers. So I guess I'm being slightly circuitous in that I haven't answered your question, but in Australia, basically, we are proposing that the groundwater source is literally within meters of the soil.
It's about 3 meters where we were out by Perth and Dowry. 3 meters. If you dig 3 meters anywhere, you hit like the water source basically. But obviously, it's really highly saline.
Yeah. So essentially, it at a low capital cost, we could just drill a borehole and suck up the water. A lot of farmers are already doing that. They just pull it out of the ground and then they build these massive trenches and just drain it to the neighbouring land, which is obviously not a particularly desirable solution. So what we're doing is we're treating it as a resource, not a problem. We're extracting that groundwater, and then we're desalinating it. We're removing the salt from it, and then the farmers have a source of fresh water, which is highly valued. All of the crops in the wheat belt are only rain-fed, and water comes at a premium. It's something like 1.5 Aussie dollars per cubic meter if you buy it, from at market rates, if it's even available. So we're extracting that. We're creating the fresh water. We're creating the electricity that a lot of rural communities would benefit from, and obviously we're supporting crop growth and food production in those regions. So it comes at a massive benefit to Australian farmers.
Thank you. That was the most comprehensive answer I've ever had on the podcast.
I'll endeavour to be a bit more concise.
No, honestly.
This is just a school day for me. I'm just learning so much.
But no, I mean, it highlights the complexity, but it's also really clear that you guys have just, you're looking, you're on the ground, you're finding out the issues and you're dealing with them, which is really interesting. I was actually going to just bring Michael in. So it sounds to me, Michael, as if you're then actually getting all this to work. What's keeping you busy on all these projects?
That's it. So Noel, at his heart, he's basically an inventor. He's got a strong maths background. So I don't know if I can say this, but I'm more of a spanner monkey.
Just say it carefully.
Yeah. No, I'm like, the one who's kind of like not on the ground, but certainly I'm more hands-on. I get involved. I get my hands dirty. I bring these things together with obviously Noel's help, guidance and support. We work closely together. I test it. I embedded the sensor systems to get all the data we needed, everything like that, basically. Also, like modeled the system, basically at the UEA with my PhD. Had a massive support from my academic supervisor, Dr. Sonia Melindi Espina, and we made a really good team, basically. And I put together a test rig in the lab which simulated PVRO, and I call it PVRO, it's just photovoltaic reverse osmosis. So that's the desalination, that's the solar energy and desalination component. So I made the test rig in the lab, and then that allowed me to model the component parts of the system and design a prototype to capture some of the waste energy, look at ways we could maybe use the waste energy and reincorporate it into processes upstream to improve the overall efficiency, increase permeate production, and allow for heightened user control of the system. So that's what I've been doing for the last few years. But I've got to say again, I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for the unlimited, almost endless belief in me that I get from and the massive support that I get from Sonia. Yeah, I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for those two.
I don't think I use the name Sonia. It has to be Dr. Sonia.
Dr. Sonia Melindi Espina.
No, it sounds like the dream team, isn't it? You need all those elements brought together. But people, I know what that look meant. So Michael, have you been out to? I guess you've both been out to Australia on site, watching how it all works. Is that taking up a lot of your time, or?
Well, our field trial really only lasted about 6 months, and we learned quite a few things during that time. How to drink beer late at night. How to speak Australian was another one. We encountered certain problems. The biofuel issue that we mentioned before. Another issue was, and this is one of another Michael's remits in terms of his work. We were pulling up so much water from the ground that the well actually caved in, and part of that, that gave us a problem because there's essentially it's sand. It's not. There's very little organic or humic matter in the soil there, so that gave us an issue because the sand just filtered up through our system and clogged some of our membranes. Which is not a phrase I usually use. So one of the issues there was because we only had what they call a 10% recovery rate, meaning that of the water, per volume water that we pull up and we desalinate, 90% still stays saline, and only 10% of that is fresh water. That's a technical limitation on the technologies that we were using. We wanted to use a positive displacement energy recovery device. And energy recovery is absolutely vital for efficient desalination. And of the available devices in the market, the positive displacement energy recovery devices are much more suited to renewably powered systems. They're also generally more efficient than the other types of pumping mechanisms or energy recovery devices that are used in reverse osmosis desalination. But they have this principal limitation that the recovery ratio is fixed, and ours was fixed at 10%. And we wanted to improve that. So one of the things that we did here was to create a switching mechanism that allows us to fool the positive displacement device in such a way that we can dynamically choose the energy the recovery ratio for that device. And that's one of these that falls within our sort of extended remit of, we have these integrated systems that we've developed, but we also want to create satellite technologies that help us interface those systems, but have potential IP value and market value as a standalone technology. So Michael did a really good job of helping develop and test that technology, and it actually worked, which was really, really good. So we're hopefully talking. We've been sort of in initial talks with potential partners in Fiji and Solomon Islands, because they have to import their fuel in barrels essentially, and because they're island dwellers, and the catchment area isn't as large as the population requires, they need to desalinate water and from seawater, and they have issues with it. It's all fossil fuel based at this point, so they're really pushing to look at renewably powered desalination, and we fit in there, I hope. Yeah.
So there's all. I mean, I was looking at a list of countries you've gone for, actually, which was quite interesting as well. Some fairly unusual set of IP countries. But that's what happens when you get unusual technologies. You focus on the relevant places. So when I've done mining ones, I've ended up with a patent application in Chile, which I've never done before or since. So it's quite funny where you end up.
Right.
So actually going to just go back to the IP a bit, because as you said, that patent you've got for the big triangle, I'm thinking of it as kind of this kind of virtuous triangle, kind of concept, as it were. I know why that would be difficult to get. It's a mix of as you say, the obviousness thing. It isn't obvious when you explain it. It becomes it's highly inventive. Clearly, you're going to have patent offices saying, "Hang on, you seem to be trying to create free energy, but we can work our way around that one as well." Yeah. But actually, getting a patent for an infrastructure concept, which is kind of the level potentially we're at, is quite challenging. So to get that, sounds like you've got something quite useful there. And I can imagine some good work being done by your patent attorneys there. Are you continuing to patent as you develop? How does that all fit together?
Well, the patent process for the overall idea is still in progress. There are 2 territories remaining that for which we're still in discussion with the lawyers in those territories. And we do have a remit to actually patent some of the work that we've been doing here. So the switching mechanism that we mentioned before. That
sounds like a super candidate, yeah.
Yeah. But the switching mechanism also fits within a kind of novel pump that we're developing, which we hope will replace the current positive displacement energy recovery device, and also replace the feed pump that we use. I mean, these pumps aren't cheap. The energy recovery device itself is around about £7,000. It's designed for use on yachts, to desalinate seawater on yachts. So it has that clientele in mind, and it has a price tag commensurate with that. And we can't afford that. If from a unit cost perspective, I think the average farmer, we need several of these units. It would just bump the unit cost up to a point where it's not really affordable. We want to decrease the cost so that it's affordable for farmers, not just in Australia, but in other countries in the world, India, for example. So we decided that we would develop our own positive displacement energy recovery device that embedded the switching mechanism, but also embedded a feed pump within it, so that it's an all-in unit, and some other interesting ideas that may or may not work out. Hopefully we don't hurt ourselves through testing it.
I'll pass back to Lee in a sec with one last question from me, actually. Noel, is about the maths bit. So you've got an interesting academic background. I don't know if did you move from environmental science to do a PhD in maths? Is that correct?
Yeah, I did.
That's unusual, isn't it?
It is unusual, I suppose. I'm an unusual person, it seems. My brother once told me that I'm more than 3.4 standard deviations away from the norm, which is accurate, I would say.
If I may, that's a fairly unusual thing for a brother to say as well. So
Well,
I don't want to get into your family background here, but what was I'm fascinated. What was your PhD? What's your maths PhD? Where was it directed?
I mean, the reason why I made that transition was because I was studying ecology here at UEA at the Environmental Science Department, and overall I was studying environmental sciences, but it included ecology modules, and there was one bit of analysis as part of the module where they're looking at the life history of sea turtles, and they essentially expressed the different stages of life history as a transition matrix. So a probability of going from being a newborn into a juvenile state to being in an adult state to being to death, essentially. And that analysis actually redirected the conservation effort from trying to save newborns, so making sure that hatchlings were correctly secured and the nurseries on the beaches were preserved. It shifted the conservation effort from that to actually just widening slightly the size of the nets that were used for fishing in the area, and that allowed a significant proportion of juveniles to actually mature. And that small, simple analysis had a massive conservation impact. And I from then I was hooked. I mean, I'd done A-level maths, and I very much enjoyed it and was quite good at it. And then I decided that actually the way to sort of move forward and be effective as a conservationist would be to study maths. So that's what I did. I went to Warwick University, where I was, Warwick is a very good place for studying maths. They were very supportive. And I looked at modeling rainforest canopy dynamics. So I was hoping that I would find an optimal way of disturbing the rainforest, because obviously pragmatically people are going to use that resource, but disturb it in a way that is complementary to the ecosystem. And that there are possibilities in that regard, something called the intermediate disturbance hypothesis, which actually implies that transitions between biomes have higher species diversity than the individual biomes themselves. So that's what I was looking to try and affect. But what I realized then was that it doesn't matter how good your model is if there's no real economic impetus to save these systems, that it would just fall fallow, essentially. So then I stopped doing that and ended up working in finance instead. But that transition into finance has allowed me to do this. This has allowed me to bring this idea to a state where hopefully it will receive the kind of recognition the idea deserves, because we really do need this. In terms of global warming, it will be significant, and we need a solution quickly.
You said really quickly in the finance. Were you a quant, perchance?
I am, yeah. I work part-time as a quant, in London.
Lee, we have our first fully fledged genius on the podcast, just for the record.
I sussed that out a long time ago.
Well, I won't bore you with the quant stuff.
Back to you, Lee.
I've never taken such a small part in a podcast, Gwilym, as you know. Normally I'm all over these things, but you've flown in this one, mate. Well done.
I've loved it. I have loved it.
Can I go now?
In a moment. Just one more thing to pick up on. I just want to speak a wee bit about Earthshot, if that's okay. Yes. Two things. I won't ask the questions together, because that makes no sense. So first question: How did the nomination come about? What made it feel like now was the right time?
Well, as I understand it, the first round in the Earthshot Prize didn't really take into account IP value. So it wasn't clear that the winners would have a solution that could be used and would be would be usable from an IP perspective. So as I understand it, that's why CIPA was brought in as part of the consultation process. So David Warrilow, London IP, became aware of this remit and contacted me because he and I have been working together for such a long time, and he is aware of the benefits of what I'm saying and the sense of it, right? I guess most people would think it's just impossible, creating this sort of, they think of it as a perpetual motion machine. So so that's really how it came about. David was kind enough to invite me and ask me whether I would like to be nominated, and of course, yes.
And the kind of follow-on question is, aside from the money, which of course makes a significant difference, doesn't it? What would it mean winning?
Well, it'd be, speaking on Noel's behalf, it would mean absolutely everything. Just the few years that I've been working alongside Noel, the determination and sacrifices that Noel's made, and it's more than just being able to, quit his day job and earn some money. This is truly a project of the heart. Passionate about it, allowing or giving not only just farmers and small holdings the opportunity to access, cheap electricity, affordable water, and repatriate land that isn't being used at the moment. This will have massive impact on communities that can't access clean water. And, water shortages is a major issue at the moment, and it's only going to get worse with climate change and whatnot. So this is one of the reasons why I love it so much. It's been the most challenging and infuriating work I've ever done. But it gets you out of bed in the morning. It's better than 9 to 5. So,
it sounds like you guys eat, live and breathe this stuff. It's
no one more so than Noel. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Noel.
I eat it as well. I live, breathe, and eat it.
He dreams it. It's a 24-hour cycle for Noel.
Well, we're coming near the end. I've got a little closing question which I'll talk about in a moment. But before we do that, I just wanted to wish you guys all the best in the Earthshot process.
Thanks, Lee.
We're obviously seeing all of the nominations that are going through, but I'd just love to see you guys pull this off. This is amazing. It really is.
Yeah, we hope so. We really hope so. It deserves to be.
Yeah, totally. We're join the back of the queue, Lee.
So I have this little job to do, and that's at the end of the podcast. I'm meant to come up with some kind of light-hearted question to end on. Generally, it's got something to do with what we've been talking about, but I can't think of anything that I might ask, even tangentially, that relates to what you guys are doing without trivialising it. So I'm not going to do that. Okay. So instead, Gwilym, my question is going to go back to our little bants at the beginning. Okay. When we were talking about the Wagatha Christie thing. And I thought I would ask you, so you guys think about this because the question's coming to you next, but I'll ask Gwilym first. No, it's an easy one, mate. Who's your favourite fictional detective and why?
Oh gosh, that's blimey. Nowhere. It's probably going to be those ones in the Raymond Chandler novels, isn't it? I love the kind of noir sort of, that you live in a shady office with a glamorous secretary, and some divorcee comes in because she suspects her husband, and you put your hat on and have a cigarette and drink a couple of bottles of whiskey and then shoot people. That kind of vibe. Okay,
yeah, got that. Yeah, kind of some dark black and white movie I'm seeing in my mind.
Got to be a black and white. Humphrey Bogart's almost certainly involved. Yeah, all that.
So go on, Michael. What about you then?
Prior to doing my PhD, I was an avid reader. I'd read all the time, which I'm just getting back into now. It's a luxury. Reading for fun is actually one of my pastimes. I don't want to get the author wrong, but I think it's the John Sanford series.
I don't know that.
Yeah, it's really good. It's been going for a few years now, and it's Detective Davenport basically is the main character, and it's kind of like just a fairly gritty, realistic story about this detective who's also like an avid gamer as well, and so sometimes he kind of bends the rules and does things he shouldn't do, and he's a bit of a ladies' man as well, which always goes down goes down well. So yeah, I'd say I'm pretty sure it's the John Sanford.
Yeah, dug him out. It is. I've got it here.
Yeah,
interesting.
Oh, look, he's googling in the background.
That's a great answer.
Yeah, Lucas. I think it's the Lucas Davenport. Is that correct, Gwilym?
Letty Davenport.
I thought it was Lucas.
I don't know. I don't know. I'm doing it I'm on Wikipedia. You've read the book. Yeah.
So
you're right. Lucas and his daughter Letty appears in later books. There you go.
I haven't got far. Spoilers.
Sorry.
You've ruined it. So let's. I'm quite terrified about this, but let's go to Noel now.
I'm a total cultural klutz. I'm a philosopher. I'm going to have to say Michael is my favourite detective because. I mean, there have been times when we've been in the lab, we've looked at the data and we're just thinking, well, where does that come from? What is that about? There was one particular occasion, I think, where, and this is like right at the beginning, we were seeing electrical currents and disturbances coming into our sensors, and we had no idea where they were coming from. And it turns out that the system that we've got is just closed, right? So the water itself was acting as a conductor of electromagnetic fields from the pump. And we eventually got there, and I made Michael a nice tinfoil hat as a prize for figuring out. So,
little bit of galvanic action going on.
Well, thanks for that, Noel. But Lee, going back to the Agatha Christie, I wasn't aware of that. That's quite funny. But maybe the Agatha Christie estate just likes the publicity, because I think I'm
sure there's a big chunk of that in it. Yeah.
When you read Agatha Christie, will just completely discount the Agatha Christie side of things, and maybe she gets some new readers to boot as well.
So Lee always tries to wiggle out of doing this himself.
I thought I'd got there again, but
go on.
So yeah, I'm a big reader like Michael, massive reader, and there's loads I could read off, but I'm going to go fairly traditional. So it's Sherlock Holmes for me every time. Lifelong fan, love Conan Doyle, but actually there's another reason for it for me. So my first degree was in learning theory and the relationship between learning theory and memory, and I wanted a way of kicking off my dissertation. And there's a piece in A Study in Scarlet where Holmes is talking to Watson about memory, and he describes memory as being a little attic. And the orderly worker moves things in and out of their attic so they can easily find them, and the disorderly worker just continually puts their junk in their attic and then can't find them. Talking about memory in that way. So for me, it was just a really great way to introduce a dissertation in a different way to the way most academics would do it. So
when you first asked the question, I instantly thought, Sherlock Holmes. I've read all of the Sherlock Holmes series, and as much as I enjoyed it, I was actually thinking about the detective stories that I have read. I'm a science fiction nut myself, but I do read a broad spectrum. And so Sherlock Holmes was my first choice, and I thought actually the Lucas Davenport series. So I'll recommend picking up a John Sanford book. You can pick it up anywhere in the series, because each one, even though it is chronological, each one's a standalone story. I highly recommend that.
Oh, we should have gone to sci-fi. Let's do that another time. I want to do a sci-fi episode, actually. That'd be. I love a bit of sci-fi.
Gwilym, we're getting these guys back on after Earthshot when they've won it. They're coming back on anyway, so.
Yeah. I'll wear my tinfoil hat next time as well.
Guys, thank you so much for coming on. 1, you've been amazing guests. 2, you're doing amazing work. And 3, this has been an amazing podcast. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's been really good talking to both of you.
Thank you so much.
And good luck with the Earthshot, and hopefully we'll talk again.